Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Grolnick, and I'm here with the Radio FWD podcast. Super excited to continue my TIFF coverage. Here with another interview, Nicolás Pereda is here to talk about his new film, Copper. So thank you so much for being here, Nicolás.
No, thanks for inviting me, Sean.
So as you know, your new film, Copper, is part of the Wavelengths program, which I thought was a little interesting because I was expecting like the rest of the Wavelengths program to be quite avant-garde and very experimental and hard to grasp, but I thought the film was I slipped right into it. It's got, it has its own vibe and its own humor, but I thought it was interesting that they chose the Wavelengths program for this film. Was there any conversation with you about where the film might fit in with the rest of TIFF?
I mean, for the last so many years, I've screened at Wavelengths. So I had a feature last year at Wavelengths as well, and
Fauna, right? Last year, or
no,
is that
one
Lazaro
last
at
year
Night?
is Lazaro at Night, and in 2020, Fauna screened there, and they're all films that are narrative films, and they're made in, the way I write is relatively conventional compared to a lot of the Wavelength stuff. I think it's just that it's not mainstream enough or experimental enough, and so I'm just kind of somewhere in between.
That's funny.
And so there's still some storytelling, there is narrative, there are characters. It's just not the way we generally think about those things.
Sure.
And so I feel quite comfortable in that space because I'm also closer to people that screen in Wavelengths and other sections many times, and so
I bet it's a bit of pressure off your back that people going into Wavelengths know that it's not going to be something conventional.
But people don't. I realize that at TIFF, I mean, who knows the sections of festivals?
I guess so.
You have to be really specialized to know
Yeah.
what Wavelengths is, in a sense. People just line up to whatever they can get tickets to, in a sense, as well at TIFF.
That's also fair. Speaking of your other films, I wanted to start off by asking you about your working relationship with Gabino Rodriguez. I mean, you've worked with him a number of times now, Fauna and Lazaro at Night, as we mentioned. Do you have him in mind now as you write your next film, or how different are his roles across these films? I remember you talking a little bit about this in the Q&A, but I was wondering if you could chat about your relationship over the course of a number of films you've worked with Gabino.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we met right before I was gonna make my first film, which was my first feature, which was my MFA graduation film at York, like almost 20 years ago. I was working with him, not as an actor, but just like we were working in theater. He was an assistant director to a play, and I was just working in it. And I realized that I liked his expressions and the way he moved independently of his acting abilities. I knew he was an actor, but I had never seen him act. And then he introduced me to his theater company, so these other two people. And I started making films with them, and I sort of learned how to make films in a way with him there, talking to him. And I enjoy that relationship. And fortunately, I realized unconsciously, I think, that it was a good thing once you have good working relationships to maintain them, because it's so easy to, like, the good things of this world are few and far between, and so like the good relationships, the things that actually work, and when they do, you tend to think like if it works here, it can work anywhere. But for me, working with them, on the one hand, it has to do with, I think they're good actors, and there's like a good artistic collaboration. But really, I think the most important thing is that it's a really good working relationship, that we get along really well, that we understand what we're doing, that we're good friends with one another. And that makes every time we make a film be very exciting and a lot of fun, because it's just like getting back together with the friends. it's kind of it's like a family reunion every time we make a film, and we've made like 9 of them or so.
Yeah. Oh
And so
wow.
maybe
Okay.
so uh, there is a sense of a of a troupe, and that's invaluable to me. It's kind of having a sense of community in the process that I'm working, as opposed to hiring people or having just like one producer that I'm close to, and then everything else is new. There's something about like all of the actors, because I've also worked with Teresita Sanchez, who's not part of the company. She plays the mother generally, and she was in my first film, and she's in a bunch of my films since then as well. And yeah, so it's a lot of us that get together, and I think that's pretty incredible.
Did you shoot the film on location in Mexico?
Yeah, we shot it in a small town about 2.5, 3 hours away from Mexico City. Um, yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I think for the Western audience, or who are not from Mexico, rather, uh, they have been hearing Mexico City in the news quite a bit. There's kind of like a rebellion against gentrification and these folks like digital nomads moving into the city and kind of like almost turning it into the next Silicon Valley or something like that, but not by choice, like effectively occupying this the city and turning it into like a hub for digital nomads. And I found it very interesting that there's I mean, Teresa's work in this film is also work from home.
it's kind of
And
like that.
what's that?
Yeah, I guess it's more like call center like, but at home. So I heard there was some call centers that were moving stuff. You don't have to have a hub necessarily, so you can, hire someone that works at their house and
Yeah.
still do the same function, and it's cheaper to not
Mhm.
host someone. But yeah, the thing with Mexico City is kind of funny. I mean, it is true that there's like like the level of digital nomads in Mexico City since the pandemic has like exploded.
Yeah.
They're mostly confined to the same neighborhoods.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, because Mexico City is enormous. Most
Mhm.
of it is, um, there's some pockets that are unbelievably pretty because they're colonial, and so like they're like small town colonial within the city in a sense, and so these were buildings that have been standing for hundreds of years from the 1800s and so on. So like there it's very beautiful. There's like very old trees and so on. So obviously they go there, to the pretty places.
Sure.
But the city's quite big, so I mean, it is an economic problem. I don't think it's catastrophic, but it is
Sure.
an economic problem. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you specifically about the various kind of work that we see in the film, or at least the work that's alluded to, because really the only sort of labor that we see is this call center job from work from home. And then we see I think it's Rosa and another coworker who is trying to sign documents, and then they're getting rejected because the signatures aren't matching, that they look too different. So, and then obviously Lazaro, our main character, the titular character sort of this copper mine that he works at. We only see him suffer in this copper mine. We don't really see him work there. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the film's relationship to labor and all the different ways that you portrayed what work is like in the modern era and how maybe alienating it is.
I think labor is a lot of stuff. Labor is not just the moment that you are producing something for, whatever entity you work for, but your commute is part of your labor in a sense, or your lunch time is part of in a sense. All of those things, I'm trying to think them as labor because you're there because of that job in a sense, or else you wouldn't be there. Yeah, with Rosa, I like the absurdity of this kind of a labor that it seems so unproductive. But then again, then a lot of labor is crazy unproductive in a sense.
Sure.
Like it's a lot of high-paying jobs are unproductive just because how society is organized. But like brokers and people that are in the stock market, in a sense, all of that, if there was not a profit incentive, it's very unproductive. It's just people making money out of money.
Hmm.
So in a sense, I feel like the whole labor landscape is full of uh, of unproductive labor in a
Well, it's
sense.
there's a concept from David Graeber, right? The bullshit jobs,
Yeah,
5 categories of jobs that effectively just exist as make work jobs.
yeah, and some of them can be very high paying, and some of them are very badly paid. And then also, everything that Teresa is doing on the phone, that we see her in the call center for so long, you feel like nothing gets done. It's
Right.
almost like she's just kind of pushing it towards another moment and so on. But I mean, also that's the nature of a lot of things. If you ask a lot of filmmakers, it's not exactly my case, but for a lot of filmmakers, they've been 5, 6 years planning to make their film, for which they have everything they want. They just are raising funds, and so they have endless meetings with people that go nowhere, and that's labor, even if the film never gets made.
Right.
And there's a lot of that. So
And unfortunately, unpaid labor most of the time.
yeah, yeah, completely.
Okay, well, we can dive deeper into the film. I remembered I was at the public screening for the film, which I didn't get to too many of them, so
Mhm.
it's a highlight of my festival experience because like I'm running around to P&I screenings and everyone's writing in notebooks, and then finally I get to be around a festival crowd. So,
Right.
your film was kind of elevated by this experience too. I love the shots of Lazaro looking down at this accident at the beginning, near the beginning of the film. We also get flashbacks to it throughout the film. Lazaro spots an accident right outside of the copper mine, and this kind of sends him spiraling down to his issues with his boss, which is now exacerbated by his issues asking for time off. Um, there's also other elements of like anonymity in the film. I like obviously Lazaro's like get up in this motorcycle helmet is very like daunting, but there's also Eduardo later on in the film who tells his boss that he saw Lazaro at the site of the accident, and he tells him off screen. Is there something to your interest in anonymity, or how I don't know how things are kind of done without your control in life or in your work?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's different reasons for making these decisions of keeping things a little bit somewhat distant, somewhat hidden. The story of Lazarus is that one of someone who is, we're unsure if he's lying or not, or if he's lying to himself or not. So when we see him at the beginning, we hardly see him. It's also we don't see what he sees, and so he could be lying all the time. Whereas if we saw what he saw, then it would be a bit more clear. But I mean, but what I'm trying to get at with that character is that he's also constantly lying to himself, and it's unclear whether he's sick or not. It's unclear, what he's actually feeling. And then all the stuff that happens off screen has more to do with focusing on what I think matters a bit more.
Hmm.
We've spent a bit more time with the boss. We This character Eduardo is just someone that's an accessory to the situation. That I need him in order to tell that little story, but I don't care about who he is. It could be anyone.
Right.
So cutting to him, to me, seems an emphasis on something that has no weight for me. So I would rather just see the reactions of the characters that we know. And also it adds to a kind of mystery when you only add things through sound off screen. There's a whole scene at the doctor's office where you don't see a woman that comes to sell pharmaceuticals, which is another form of labor that I think is totally ridiculous. When I don't know, I haven't seen it here. I don't know if it happens more virtually, or I mean, because pharmaceuticals are pushing drugs towards doctors here
Yeah.
and everywhere, but in Mexico they do it in a way. less and less, but when I was younger, I saw it all the time. That felt so overt. Like you would just be waiting in the doctor's office, and someone from a pharmaceutical will come in, cut in line, talk to the doctor about how they really want to sell these drugs, and they're giving the doctor all these drugs, so please push them onto the patients,
Mm,
which seemed insane because then you go talk to the doctor and you're not sure who's their allegiance are to, with their patients or with the pharmaceuticals, you know.
mhm.
So but then in that scene, you don't see the person selling, but you hear them and you see the patient. Because for me, it's more interesting to like the patient's reactions towards what's happening
Right.
than that transaction in and of itself.
Yeah, the world of medicine in this film is very interesting, how it's been, one, co-opted by maybe these private interests, like the pharmaceutical company who's selling a drug to a doctor who might end up prescribing the drug over something that works better just from their personal experience because of the profit incentive or something like that. But also the fact that this when Lazaro goes to see the doctor and the doctor tells Lazaro that there's nothing wrong with him, she's also motivated largely by her relationship with the boss and the copper mine, and refusing to give days off because, well, it feels like that there's some sort of incentive for her not to interrupt the productivity of this copper mine. I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about, is this like a Mexican like experience that you've had, or is this just something you've noticed about the medical industry in general, how they're kind of, I don't know, co-opted by managers and all of this bureaucracy involved?
Yeah, I mean, in the context of the film, which is kind of odd, there is a link between the doctor's office and the mine, as if the doctor's office was owned by the mine,
Right.
which is a little bit of a stretch. But I was trying to kind of, it could happen in an informal way in Mexico, which it does happen because mining towns in Mexico are controlled by the owner of the mine, meaning the whole town, the public space becomes almost like part of his realm. So it's like a kingdom in a sense because
Wow.
the level of power that these people have is immense. They have so much money, but they're in the most poor-stricken parts of the country because who wants to live in a mining town? And so the contrast between someone that's multimillionaire and and miners have to live more or less close to the mine as well. So it's like, and they tend to be enormous industries that take over every other industry. So they function kind of like a feudal town
Mm.
where everybody works for the company. The company provides. People are happy with the company because it provides until they're not, until they realize they've been exploited and they have like health problems and so on. But so even if the hospital and the clinic, the public clinic, because this is supposed to be like a public clinic in a way, like a state-run thing. Even the state-run things, in a sense, give tribute to the mine administration because the mine is much bigger than whatever public services can be offered. So yeah, I was interested in that, how like at the end of the day, your health and your well-being and everything is dependent on the mine. At the same time, it's a strange film because you are not sure if he's actually sick. Maybe the doctor, she can still be a more or less decent doctor, and maybe he is not sick. So it's not exactly the story of overt oppression from authorities towards this poor mining worker. I think the kind of oppression that exists is more is systemic. It's there. It's all the time. But that doesn't mean that the one time this guy goes to the doctor's going to lie to him and tell him like, we cannot serve you. It's a little bit more complex than that.
Sure, but we do get a little bit of evidence that he is suffering from some sort of ailment. Maybe it's just a panic attack, but we do see him at some point in the mines, like having trouble breathing, as he was describing. And
Right.
I do. Of course, I understand the ambiguity of the film. That is, I mean, consistent throughout. left ambiguous largely through the runtime what each of these characters' relationships are, even. And it's, I mean, some of them are clarified, but others are left very ambiguous. I mean, we have a closing shot here where things are kind of thrown for a loop between Rosa and Lazaro. And it's difficult, like with their ages, it would feel like they're cousins at the very least if they're related, but turns
Right.
out that she is Lazaro's aunt. You know, like there's a lot of these ambiguities built into the film. I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about maybe the ambiguity of the relationships and how it relates to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think about this guy who lives this sort of isolated life. He's also kind of a bit strange. His relationship with his mom is really like he's already 40 or so, and the mom like puts him like his shirt on him and it's very like treats him like a baby. And like he just sits around when he's at the house and the mom cooks for him while she's working, and he just waits till the mom finishes his meal for him. And then he has no contact in a sense with women, and he's into women, and he doesn't have any way to, you know, to put his desire anywhere. And so like his aunt has been around his entire life, and the aunt, I think, sort of entertains him because she cares about him to some degree, but you know, she has her life, she does interact with other people, she has a boyfriend, but he's always there. Like, so like they go out with a boyfriend and he just kind of comes along all the time. And so I think she has an allegiance with him and she feels for him, but she doesn't, you know, doesn't know exactly how to behave. And he doesn't know how to behave either because he's
Mhm.
attracted to her, but he knows it's his aunt, so he's not going to do anything, but maybe he will. And it's this kind of situation where neither of them know um, how they want to handle that relationship. And I think it's a little bit, I'm pushing it a little bit because they're related. But if they were friends that had that relationship, I think a lot of people would be able to sort of, identify with that situation, of a situation where you feel like maybe you want to be with someone and the other person entertains you because they're, you know, you're close friends, and you know, you create a certain tension that is not necessarily nice, but it keeps you excited about life in a sense as well, and even if it's not very productive.
Well, especially in the middle of this mining town, which you were just describing, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I do appreciate that, you know, things are only made clear as you continue to sit and let this film like kind of wash over you, you know, like you don't give answers right away, which I really do think propels the film along. Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit about this car that Rosa's boyfriend owns. Like, is it's like decked out in sort of race. It's got like a racing cage in it, and like all the stickers surrounding the car are kind of like body modification garages and like all of these companies that work on specialized vehicles. Like, I was wondering if you could chat a little bit about that car. I thought it was so fascinating. It's like a weird orange too.
That whole side of things was a lot bigger in the original screenplay, and when I started doing location scouting, and I spent a lot of time with like race cars that are they they have a particular name in Mexico, but basically these are races of like car races that are beat up cars that get sort of that mechanics fix as a hobby. And so
Mhm.
there's all the mechanics in that whole area fix up and suit up these cars. They turn them into race cars, and they have like they buy like special engines, and they, you know, they put the cages and all that stuff, and then they race them once a year or twice a year. The I went to one and it's super dangerous. I mean, they go super super fast and people are right in the sidelines. There's like
Right.
no security of any kind. Uh, there's no media. It's very kind of like small town, middle of nowhere. People.
Underground. Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's not underground either. It's very public. Like, everybody knows, and there's like
Oh,
flyers in the
okay. Oh,
town, and
interesting.
so
Uh-huh.
it's like people like entire families go there for the entire day, and people just sit and eat at
Wow,
night, like
okay.
having picnics, and these cars are going, and there's an announcer. So it's not like an underground thing at all. It's like a family. I mean, I went, nobody cared. I was filming, and people
Yeah,
are
yeah,
like
yeah.
taking pictures with the cars and so on. But it's like a subculture that's very like driven by mechanics, and I thought it was kind of fun, and I liked the idea of this kind of this impossible car. It's super hard to drive, also, like because they're race cars, so like they react totally different than normal cars.
Sure.
I mean, fortunately, the actor that plays a mechanic has a mechanic background and knows a lot about cars and loves cars, and so he could
Mm,
drive it, and it was like, which was a blessing because it was very difficult to move around with it.
I
But
see.
I mean, I wanted to create more about that subculture, but it was difficult to to link it to the story because whenever I filmed around those that universe, it was very noisy. It was a lot of people, and the film is very quiet and very few people around. So, uh, in a sense, it was a compromise at the end because I felt it was like the contrast would be too big between
Mm.
the fun of the amount of. I don't know. It was difficult to introduce the world of the races, of the car races.
Could you just what's the name of this subculture in Spanish? Maybe people can look it
I
up
mean,
after.
they're called carcachas, and
Carcachas.
a carcacha is just a slang for a really old beat up car.
Yeah, I think in English there's a thing like that too, like sleeper builds, where it's like a
Right.
what's that?
Yeah, no, I have no idea about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, no. So it's like a normal looking car, maybe like a
Mhm.
Honda Civic or whatever, or
Yeah.
like something you'd see every day on the street, and then under the hood, it's got like it's crazy. So that's like a
Right.
sleeper build. I don't know if it's similar, but maybe I'll look into Carcaccia
Right. Yeah.
afterwards.
They usually use the cars that are older too because
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
like it as like they are more into, like they also look super vintage.
Mm,
They're not sort of newer like cars that like are discarded that they turn into these things, but they always find sort of very sort of old, like a huge hood, I guess, in order to have like a big engine. I don't know anything about cars really, so.
well, in relation to the car itself, I mean, Lazaro rides a motorcycle. Is there some sort of connotation that you're trying to evoke with Lazaro and his like motorcycle get up?
All the miners drive motorcycles in
Oh yeah.
Mexico, so
Oh,
that's
okay.
like every miner, at least the mines that I've been to, because I spent quite a bit of time in a mine when I was not writing this, but I was working on a different project, and so that's kind of why I started getting interested in the world of mines. And yeah, every single miner that you see in the morning. Sometimes it's I did this in my film Fauna. It turned out okay. Could have been better, but because they go to the mine while it's still dark, you see all these little lights coming in the middle of the road, and they're all these kind of small, everybody's driving because even though the mine is next to the mining town, you still have to go sometimes 10 kilometers to get into the mine, and so
Mm,
everybody drives these tiny motorcycles, so.
mm. Yeah, this world of of the mine sounds very fascinating. Did you ever go down to the mines? Did you feel like this rough air?
Yeah,
And, oh wow.
the first cut had footage from inside the mine, and I can't remember why I decided to
Mm,
take it out. It had to do with this idea of what's off screen, hiding things.
yeah.
But I had all this stuff that seemed to like it would add like production value or whatever. But then at the same time, I was just not. Um, I felt it was, yeah, just maybe unnecessary.
Yeah, you in this film at least there's avoidance of like genre tropes and I don't know, we don't see much of this violence and we don't see any violence really. We don't see the body that Lazarus supposedly discovers. But during the Q&A, I wanted to bring this in because this was a fascinating point that you made, and maybe you can explain it from scratch, obviously, for our viewership who weren't there at the Q&A. But you brought something up about the kind of relationship that corruption has with the drug cartels in Mexico. The idea that it's a very easy excuse for modes of corruption to blame the world of drug cartels and the violence that they bring for their failings that aren't necessarily related to drug cartels. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about this idea and how it might relate to what you're trying to evoke with the film.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that I'm super interested in this subject matter because I think there is a very big misunderstanding of what a drug cartel is. Because in many ways, what we think a drug cartel is for the majority, I mean, and I tend to also go into that direction, is totally non-existent. The idea of a drug cartel as a strong independent entity that exists isolated from the state and from civil society just doesn't exist. Like there is not like this kind of like group of bad guys that exist there that have like these funky names and that just bring in terror. So that is a fantasy that the United States created, like the CIA created, in order to be able to invade different, and interfere in local politics. They started in Colombia, and then they've done it all over Latin America, but it's not organized crime operates from within the state in Mexico. So it's not like there is a clear line. It's not like it's infiltrated the state. It's that the state itself, like governors and police chiefs, military officers that are really high up, all the way till like a simple cop, are part of the, not all of them of course, but many of them are part of the cartels. And then there's like kids that are like 15 years old that are just running drugs for people because it's so much better job than anything they can get, so like civil society is also permeated. And then that also includes a lot of business people, and some business people because they're greedy and they want to make much more with the cartels, and then some because they don't have any other option because the cartel is here to stay, and the governor is part of the cartel, and the cops are part of the cartel, and the local kids are part of the cartel. So like you become part of the cartel because or else it's dangerous, and so you just are part of it. And so organized crime becomes kind of the status quo of business, government, social interaction in a lot of areas in Mexico. And mining towns generate a lot of profit. So obviously, organized crime is going to be kind of interested in what's happened there because the narcos, drugs for the narcos are one of the big businesses. But like mining is also a big business. Avocados are a huge business. All of the avocados that are grown in Mexico are controlled by, not all, but like the majority are controlled by the narcos as well. So it's like these businesses that just sprawl. And so what happens is that when in a mining town there is an uprising, and you could see I did some research around this. I mean, I didn't do it personally. I read research done by other people in which whenever there is a labor dispute in mining towns in Mexico, soon after there's a wave of violence that is attributed to organized crime, to the narcos. And so the narcos become a scapegoat for anything related to violence that happens in small towns. So if you are a union leader and want to go on strike, and so the easiest thing for the mine is to get rid of you. So they murder you and they say it's organized crime.
Right.
But when they say it's organized crime, they don't mean the organized crime that the mine belongs to. They mean
Right.
drug cartels that are here wanting to push their drugs. Because we are so focused on drugs when we think about the cartels, and we're so focused on this idea of these bad guys that come in and and make drugs and sell drugs and murder people. But it's way more complicated than that, I guess. But it is the perfect scapegoat, obviously.
Yeah, I want to link. I'm gonna put the name of the book up here, but I want to link a book called "Drug Cartels Do Not Exist" by Osvaldo Zavala. I think it's awesome. I've
Yeah.
read that book and I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's a super interesting book that basically in much more eloquent ways explains kind of what I was trying to say. And and I think what he says, I mean, it's very provocative to say drug cartels don't exist,
Sure.
but really in a sense, what exists is something that's totally different. So in a
Well,
sense,
there's a cultural mythos, right?
yeah,
The cultural
yeah.
idea, but then there's like what functionally what exists, and
And
that's
also because there's so many movies about drug cartels
yeah,
and so many TV shows about drug cartels
exactly.
that just reinforce that idea. And that idea actually is super helpful. I mean, he talks about it in his book. That idea is super helpful for the state because then it cleans the state's hands. If you just basically have an enemy that's just too strong to combat, the
Mhm,
worst thing that you can say about the state is that it's that is inefficient, that it's just not good at combating organized crime,
mhm.
but they're not complicit. They're just simply inefficient. And so that's not a bad position to be in, to say like dude, we do what we can, but this, this gone out of control and they have they have too much power. And so that's the narrative that the state wants to maintain, that they have nothing to do with it, with the drug cartels. It's just that they're just too powerful to combat, which is clearly bullshit because the both even the Mexican military has so much more power and money than the drug cartels could ever have. No matter how many billions the drug world generates. I mean, the drug cartels operate in the United States like big time, and clearly the United States military has more power and has more people and has, but it's just that there's too many. It's too complex. It's
Yeah,
not
that's a
just
great
these bad.
parallel, though.
It's not these people with like face tattoos terrorizing,
Right.
the world.
You briefly mentioned your influences and where you kind of think that this film exists in the in the through line through cinema history, and like where your influences come from and what sort of films this is like. I know it's hard to pin it down because I think you've done something truly unique here, but I would love to still hear about your influences. I know you brought up I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but Xia Ming Liang, right? During your Q&A as one of your influences, but I would just love to hear about other films that might have inspired this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are, like, it tends to happen. I used to watch a lot of films when I was like in my early 20s that left so totally that became sort of that excited me about the possibilities of the future of what I was gonna do. And so those filmmakers that were making films in the early 2000s that I thought were incredible suddenly have stayed with me for many many years. And I still think they're some of the most exciting filmmakers around, but maybe that's also because I'm biased because I watched them when I watched that stuff like 25 years ago. I was really excited about it. So people like Tsai Ming Liang, like Apichatpong Verasetakul,
Mm,
the Thai director, um, like Ho Xiaxian from Taiwan as well, and I mean Hong Sang-soo as well in a very different way because this film has very little Hong in it in a sense, but like but still there are things there of Hong Sang-soo. It's more like he makes these sort of ultra low budget relationship comedies in South Korea that I find super endearing and super
mm,
interesting and very smart, and I think he's like one of the best filmmakers around, even though he's making films that are like they with very inexpensive equipment, with no crew, almost, with you know um, yeah, there is something about those filmmakers, and then there's some European ones that I'm quite interested in. There's like Bruno Dumont I like a lot, and Chantal Akerman was a huge influence always. I even made a film that's a little tribute to Chantal Akerman because I was commissioned to do something about a filmmaker, and I think her work is incredibly inspiring also because of how eclectic it is.
Mm,
How she managed to make one of the most important films in the history of cinema when she was 24 years old, which
mm,
is Jan Dillman,
Gentleman.
and then she continued making all kinds of stuff, and she didn't want to replicate Jan Dillman. She never even attempted to do that, or even sort of like have a style that just continued in the same vein. She just it's super strange. Like, she had this immensely successful film at 24, and the next year she made News from Home, which is like a much harder film to watch, a much more experimental film. And then she started making all kinds of things, and her fictions are super strange as well, like the ones that came after. So I like how engaged she is with the experimental world, as being sort of a fiction filmmaker that understands her practice within the confines of the experimental world. I think she would screen at Wavelengths, let's say. Maybe not, because she's too famous, so she would
Let's
just
just
be
say
the
that, yeah.
masters or whatever. But like, if she hadn't gotten famous, those films would screen at Wavelengths.
Nicolás, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope people can check out your film when it releases, when it comes out. And if you have something to shout out, maybe your work at York or anything else that people might be able to check out of yours, now would be a great time to let them know.
Yeah, no, not really. If people want to watch some of my films, they're on my Vimeo page, so you can just look for my Vimeo and have
I'll
some
link
stuff
it in
there.
the description for sure.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much.
Take care. Thank you.